Welcome back to the Daily Vent. Next topic is ask yourself this. What was life like before COVID and what is it like now? And ask yourself these questions in entirety. I'm talking your daily commute, running errands, everything from school to work to the grocery store, sports, hobbies, conversations, church, social interactions, everything. Compare it and ask yourself how much and how long, how much are we to do in this season of COVID and for how long? Shouldn't there be something after, some return at some point? And what are the reasons they give for continuing in this limbo and not returning to normal, that is? Are they good reasons? Do the reasons even make sense? Ask these kinds of questions. So again, similar to the last episode in terms of analyzing the situation, this is getting more specifically into the questions that maybe you should be asking yourself. This is while we were in the COVID lockdown, etc. season, where you had a lot of singling of people out because of certain decisions that people wanted to make for their own health that people should have been allowed to just make, I guess. Yeah, people should have been allowed to just have autonomy over their own health. And that should have been just okay. That should have been fine. To just have enough respect for people to just let them make their own decisions for their own health and their own livelihoods and their own families. But we kind of went insane for 2 years and lost sight of being reasonable because of something. I want to just say arguably a low percentage death rate, but then again, different people might define that differently. I think it's probably fair to say it wasn't the Black Death, but for many, probably worse than the common cold. That might be a very reasonable take on it. Some people might say, oh, well, that's very unreasonable of you, Spencer. I could be wrong about some things at times or details, but I digress. Essentially, the idea of it's not even really COVID itself. It's the idea of what are we doing and how long are we supposed to do it for? Because there was a period of time where it felt like there was just no end in sight. If you compared the trajectory of everything from development to vaccines and etc. to the timeline during, I think it was H1N1. It's been a while since I read through this article or kind of post or whatever you'd call it, this writing of the kind of Reader's Digest of the timeline. But essentially, as far as I remember, don't quote me on it. And, feel free to call me out on this if I'm wrong on the details here. But essentially, it was once they got the vaccines ready and available, they gave people a week or two to get them. And then they declared H1N1 pandemic was over. Did that happen during COVID? I think not. And and so it's before things started to get better, we didn't really know things were going to get better in terms of what the rhetoric was, top-down rhetoric, in terms of what governments are doing and what they were going to do if they were going to let us go, you know what I mean? And so it was one of those things where it's compare every single thing in your daily life to before COVID versus during COVID. And you could still do this. If you have enough memory of what your daily life was like, you could still do this comparison. It might be valuable for you to do that. But I literally went through listing off each of these subjects because it's there's so many little things that potentially could have been changed in your everyday life that were just normal before, but all of a sudden they're not normal anymore. Because people have said it's not normal or try to make it seem as if it's not normal. But it's oh, you can't go see your friends. Oh, you can't go to church. If you go to the grocery store, you have to do X, Y, Z. And maybe you can't go to this place right now, or you can't go to etc. You can't do your community event, depending on what volunteering you did. Oh, maybe you can't do that at all. And in some cases, some people may have really seriously suffered because they couldn't access the services that were just normal and available readily beforehand. And that might have just gotten kind of kicked to the side by what happened during COVID, right? And so it's just compare, just a simple comparison of how much did life change, and was it good that we just accepted that or accepted that for so long? It's one of those things where it's not necessarily bad that we changed how we lived for a period of time, per se. That, again, maybe is a controversial statement. But the question is how much and how long? Those are kind of the two main questions. How much are we going to do, and for how long are we going to do it? Right? What is the reasonable thing to do here? What's the wise thing to do here? And I think it's fair to say in the beginning that maybe it was all about public health, but I mean some people probably call that, very suspicious that it was ever about public health. Some people just say it was all about control. I think over time I kind of went it went from being more about public health and less about control over time to being less about public health and more about control. Hopefully I said all those words right. Hopefully you get what I mean. Essentially, by the end of it, it kind of seemed like it was a bit more about just a power trip controlling people than it was about reasonable public health decisions. That's probably a fair thing to say. And again, different people are going to disagree on that or agree on things, but I'll leave that there. So essentially just, always kind of try to keep a good memory of what happened and what's happening now, and try to constantly kind of compare and contrast and check things just to kind of see where we're at. Till next time, this has been The Daily Vent.